Honey and Vinegar by Linetta Davis. Rebirth Ink, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Read by Linetta, formerly Davis, Alexander. Death. Even the darkest night is followed by the dawn. So then the end is also the beginning. Journal entry, November 15th, 2003. My daddy died. My daddy is dead. I never imagined that one day he'd leave me. Now, how can I live when such a big part of me is gone far away? Nothing in life has prepared me for this day. How life plays itself out. On Thursday, what I would have said if I had known that was the last time I would hear my daddy's voice. The last thing we said was, "I love you." My daddy told me a few weeks ago that I act like people owe me something. I thought he was so wrong then, but now I know that he is right. I feel he owed me to stay until I felt I was ready for him to go. And I know that is really selfish, but still, I just want to scream, "Daddy, why did you leave me? How dare you leave me without saying goodbye? It's not fair." But then I think he must have felt that he had given all he had to give. I just really wish I knew that he knew that I felt honored to be his daughter, that I'm so happy to have come through him, that I owe him so much for guiding me into proper womanhood. I hope he didn't leave feeling like he hadn't accomplished anything or feeling that he was useless to me, that he no longer served a purpose in this life. And yet, how self centered of me to want him to hang on in there just for my benefit. I feel like he didn't even try to hold out. But then why should he? If his purpose in life was to be a good father and to guide me into my destiny, then he fulfilled it wholeheartedly. I would be in error to hold him in this hell just so I could continue to talk to him about books and movies and argue with him about giving him some grandchildren. But oh, how my soul cries. I actually feel like something is inside of me wringing out my insides. I just want to lie in my bed until the pain goes away, until this life and death thing makes sense to me, until I stop trying to pretend that my daddy isn't dead, until I can deal with the reality that he's journeyed beyond my reach. In some kind of weird, morbid sort of way, I had always practiced or imagined what it would be like when I heard the news that someone I loved was dead. Just thinking about it sent me into tears. But in all my preparation, I never imagined that I would hear that my father was dead. The Milwaukee Journal Sentinel had released a review of the play on Thursday, the day before the performance, and earlier that week, I was interviewed on a popular radio show in the city. Thursday night, I was driving around and it hit me that in all the excitement that I had not spoken to my father since the weekend. In the most recent months, we had spoken as frequently as every day, so this was very much out of character for us. I called him, and as soon as I heard his voice, I excitedly reported to him about all the publicity I was receiving for the play. I probably talked nonstop for 5 minutes. I paused so that he could get a word in edgewise, but he was barely audible. I knew immediately that something was wrong. When I asked, he said, in a voice and tone that I had never before heard from him, "I'm tired." My heart beat wildly. Something told me that this was it. I don't know how I knew it, but I did. I tried to play it off, tried to deny the instincts that were telling me to make the most of that moment. "Daddy, what have you been doing that you're so tired?" "Nothing," he said. "I'm just tired." There was something different in my father's voice. It seemed void already of life. In my spirit, I knew that his fatigue was not physical. He sounded like a defeated warrior. Although the idea of losing my father was inconceivable, I am thankful to the small voice inside of me that urged me to say everything now that I needed to say. My mind took a quick inventory. We would talk for hours almost every night. We had argued, but we had always made amends. There were no secrets between us. We had said and shared everything. I love you, Daddy, I said. I love you too. Okay, I'll talk to you later. Okay, bye. Goodbye. My father had once worked as a mechanical technician in Dallas. However, since 1994, he had been unemployed except for odd jobs after having moved back to Arkansas to look after his father when his mother died. It was only in 2002 that my uncle, a former psychologist, diagnosed my father as clinically depressed during his visit with him in Atlanta. My father was made to face the fact that he had never gotten over losing his mother. She had died in her sleep in November 1993. As a result, he often fell deeper into depression during the winter holidays. When he returned from his trip, he was very angry with his brother, but seriously contemplated his diagnosis. Eventually, he came to terms with it, and when he was comfortable, quite a while later, he told me of his and Uncle Gerald's conversation. I told him that I agreed with my uncle and maybe seeing somebody wouldn't be a bad idea. But as usual, he wasn't concerned with himself and thought only of me. He tried to make me promise that in the event of his death, I would not follow in his footsteps and that I would not stop living when he died. I was frightened. I thought that if I promised to stay strong, that I may just as well sign his death certificate. I knew, everyone knew, that we loved each other tremendously. Each one's survival was linked, intertwined with the survival of the other. Once, when he was driving me from college in Lorman, Mississippi, to his home in Dallas, he said, "Have you ever heard about incidences where if one twin dies, as soon as the other hears about it, that twin dies too from heartbreak? Well, that's how I feel. If anything ever happened to you, I know that as soon as I heard about it, I would die." I was 20 years old at the time, and I had never heard such a profession of love from anyone before or since. Those words changed me. I went from reckless to sensible almost overnight, and knowing that someone loved me that much made me begin to want to love myself. So when he asked me to make that promise to continue living after his death, I flat out refused. Through tears, I shouted to him, "If you die, I'll die too." Calandra and I were shopping in Kenosha when I got a frantic call from my dad's youngest brother. He wasn't really sure what the details were. The paramedics had rushed my father to the hospital. He was concerned that my dad had been naked and had not had time to dress himself. My Uncle Jack was on his way to the hospital and would call me as soon as he knew what was going on. He called me back 5 minutes later and said simply, "Danielle, he's dead." Immediately, the string that had held me together all my years, through the sexual abuse, the neglect, the self-hatred, slowly began to unravel. And the man who had shielded me and made me feel that nothing could touch me, that I was beautiful and accepted and worthy, was gone. Journal entry, November 17th, 2003. I am now on the first leg of my new journey, the lone road to bury my father. I don't know. Maybe I want to go crazy and get lost somewhere, wandering around aimlessly. I'm wondering, what were my daddy's last thoughts? When he looked into the eyes of death, did he welcome it like a long lost friend or did he try to run and hide? I know it's selfish, but I wonder if he thought about me. I wonder if he thought, "Oh well, I hope she'll make it." Or did he page through his memory and sigh with relief because he knew that he had supplied me with everything I need to carry on in his absence? I wonder if I had gotten pregnant or had gotten married if he would have stayed a little longer. My future husband and children will never really understand why I'll probably cry on the day after my birthday, or why I'll cry with that same intensity on November 15th. They will never understand why every spring break I'll escape to the Gulf and retrace the steps my father and I had made many years ago. If they're ignorant to the answers, it won't be because I didn't tell them. Anyone who knows me knows how much I love my daddy, but only I know how intensely he loved me. That's the part I struggle with. I know he accepted death because he was tired, but why wouldn't he live knowing how much I need him to talk to joke with, to debate, and flat out argue with? I need him to keep me honest. I need him to keep me happy. I need him to get on my nerves and tell me about myself even when I'm not really trying to hear it. I need him to act surprised when he hears my voice on the phone and ask, "Is this my sweetheart? Is this the most beautiful girl in the world?" I need him. My father has built up a storehouse of knowledge and wisdom within me, but I'm not ready to spend it. Sooner or later, I have to make my first withdrawal and deal with the fact that I'll only hear his voice in my head, and that as great a father that he is, that he deserves a rest. True love is letting go even when you don't want to. God knows. If I could have done something, said something to keep my dad here with me, I would have done it. But all I can do now is cherish every moment, every word, every piece of our love and live. In A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis, he compared losing his wife to a man who has lost his leg. His whole way of life will be changed. All sorts of pleasures and activities that he once took for granted will have to be simply written off. Duties too. At present, I'm learning to get about on crutches. Perhaps I shall presently be given a wooden leg, but I shall never be a biped again. This is exactly how I'm feeling right now. My daddy was my good leg, and even though I may eventually grow accustomed to him not being here, his absence will pain me for the rest of my life. Day by day, I will manage better with this great loss, but right now, my spirit is disabled, and I can't see how I can move forward without him. Seeing death in any form, autumn leaves falling from the trees, or a person we love breathing a last sigh of life, can call us to face questions we would rather avoid. They are the ultimate questions of life. Who am I? Who have I become? Who do I want to be? I am a daughter, a sister, a friend, a confidant, an advocate, and an enemy. I am a beautiful, intellectual woman who dreams of success on many levels and who is working to accomplish her goals. I am a woman who has had much heartbreak and is trying to learn and thus grow from them. Right now, I have become a scared little girl that wants her daddy. Even though this stage of life is inevitable, I just never thought about not hearing my dad's voice. Talking was our main connection. I may not have seen or touched my dad in years, but I would have just talked to him last week. Now the reality is setting in that I will never hear my dad's voice again. My dad was my checks and balance system. If I did something well or not so well, he'd let me know. If I had an idea, he'd help me develop a plan and weigh the pros and cons. If I was on an emotional high, he made me look at things rationally. When I had a pity party, he refused to come. I know that my daddy is gone. That is the painful reality of my present life. I wish I could know that everything was said that was supposed to be expressed. I know my dad was proud of me, but if he would have waited, I would have made him even prouder. I wanted to take care of him like he took care of me. My dad would have been the ultimate test for any man I was to marry. If he could hold his own in a conversation with my dad, then he was the one for me. I wanted to send my children on summer trips to stay with their grandfather. He schooled them on the game of chess, the Black nationalist movement, and the beauty of bookmarks. But now what? Now my father is what legends are made of, and my tears alone water his grave. I'm sure that losing my father is the most traumatic event that could have taken place in my life. At least for now, it feels that way. But for this reason, I believe that if there are such things as guardian angels and ministering spirits like the Bible speaks of, then indeed those beings, which have been assigned to me, may have been working overtime to keep me from losing my sanity. The news seemed to spread quickly throughout my community or circle of friends and associates. In response to their outpouring of concern and condolences, I insisted that I wanted to be alone, for I, in fact, was waiting for my own death. While most of my friends seem to welcome my isolation, I say this because I rarely see them or talk to them even a year later. Calandra would have none of that. She seemed to make it her business to keep me on the telephone with her or to get me out of the apartment, if not for manicures and pedicures, at least for some fresh air. After our shopping excursion ended abruptly with the phone call, she patiently waited, held on to me, and guided me to my car. She took the keys and, in near silence, drove me home. I felt that I was on the brink of losing my sanity because, in the midst of my sorrow, I started making jokes. I remember saying, "How my daddy gonna leave me like that? Oh, he clowning now." It did seem like a joke, a very cruel one. Just the day before, I was on the mountaintop, but before I got a chance to really enjoy the view, I plummeted from my position and landed face first into the mud and despair of the valley. When I reached my apartment, I was finally alone. I had always had my father. The world could come against me, but it did not matter because I had my father. Whatever happened in my life, or an instance in which there was something that I didn't understand, I could call him and he would help me sort things out. But now, who would I call? Who could help me deal with losing the one who truly loved me? In the quiet darkness of my spirit, I kept hearing the words from one of Paul's epistles. We do not grieve like those who have no hope. Although I did not feel an immediate connection with these words, they did seem to comfort me as much as they were allowed to do. Admittedly, I found the regurgitation of scripture from my unconscious a bit strange since I had voluntarily excommunicated myself from the religious aspect of the Christian church 3 years prior. I had loved church, but the feeling was not mutual. Despite my ministry work, the people that made up the body of Christ in this small congregation saw fit or rationalized their spreading a false rumor about my sexuality and the associate minister, who, according to them, was the object of my homosexual affections. In the year 2000, much to my great grandmother's and surprisingly to my father's dissatisfaction, I left the stifling conditions of that church and chose to look for the face of God in more non traditional ways. As a result, my dad would tease me and call me a mystic. But more often than not, he found that our ideas about God and the master plan were quite the same. Journal entry. Do I forgive or add anger to my feelings since I've seen the way my dad was living? We went into the house today and it looked like something that should be condemned. It seriously looked like there was no possible way that my father and grandfather could be living in that mess. As we were looking through the piles of debris, I saw two of my dad's teeth on the shelf in the hallway. When I pointed them out to my uncle, I felt him choking back the tears. I know it's hard for those of us who love this man and who thought the world of him to imagine him living in pestilence. Granddaddy seems totally oblivious to what's going on. When I looked at him floating through life, not aware of what's happening around him, I wondered if I would prefer to see my dad that way. I don't know. Sometimes just having them around is enough, but that seems cruel to me in a way. If my father was tired of this life, then he should be allowed to let go without worrying about how everyone else may feel. Journal entry. Constantly on my mind is Hamlet's famous soliloquy: to be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing in them. Now I face the fact that I want to die too. I want to lay in the bed and not get up. But I know my life, my destiny calls me to get up, but my flesh has grown weary. The two men, my great grandfather and my father, who loved me with no strings attached, are dead, and everything else seems frivolous, pointless. I can't imagine living the rest of my life without talking to my dad, or seeing him, or arguing with him. I don't blame him for leaving. I just wish I could go with him. And I believe I will go with him. Just Maybe not right now. Journal entry. We just came from picking out my dad's casket. It all seems so ridiculous. Before the casket, my uncle and I went to get my dad a suit. I made the comment, I'd like to see him in blue. Seeing him in this blue suit in a casket is the last thing that I want. I guess this is all about showing people how much we love the deceased by how much money we're willing to put on something that's going to be in the ground anyway. My dad didn't have any insurance, which isn't a surprise because he didn't have a job. So my grandfather had a burial policy on my dad and my Uncle James. My Uncle Aunt paid the difference after the policy was spent. After my play is picked up or I get a book deal, I'm going to give the money back. My dad wanted my Uncle Amp and I to spend more time together. I guess he's getting his wish. The stage of grief that is anger set in very quickly for me. I was there within the first week. I was just sitting back thinking about all the good for nothing people or the evil ones that I've encountered in my life. And I seriously wanted God to explain to me why they were still here and my father wasn't. Every man who had molested me or raped me was taking up space on this earth, calling me saying they were sorry about my dad's passing. And as bad as it sounds, I was thinking, yeah, I'm sorry too, because it should have been you, not him. Everything about life without my father seemed to push me closer to the grave. I didn't want to have any part of this life where noble and loving fathers had to leave their daughters to men who came bearing gifts but had poison on their minds. I've observed that people usually go beyond not speaking ill of the dead and end up giving them sainthood. I don't want to do that to my father, but he was a good man. The fact that my stepfather raped me and was allowed to come live in the same house with us again bothered my father to no end. And my stepfather was released from prison. After my stepfather was released from prison, my father made a surprise visit up here to see him. I found out only a few years ago that he, in fact, had planned to kill my stepfather, but my mother had given my stepfather a heads up and he knew to stay clear. Despite the violence and the harm it will cause, not only to my mother's husband, but to my father, who would have been convicted of murder, I was impressed. I wasn't impressed with the idea that my father could take a life, but that he would sacrifice his life for me and that he refused to hide his discontent. When my stepfather was released from jail and was later reunited with his quote unquote family per Milwaukee County Social Services program, everyone without hesitation welcomed him back into the fold. Hey, come and have a drink with me. Why don't you come over for dinner? How could you commune with someone who knowingly molested a child in your family? How could you pretend that it never happened? As a young girl, I knew that they should have chosen sides. Either you believe me or you believe him. I have never been sure whose side most of my family members were on. Maya Angelou's family had her molester killed. I have never wished for anyone's blood to be spilled. However, I am happy to recall that my dad refused to play the game, refused to act like everything was back to normal, and he was not uncomfortable with letting everyone know that what my mother's husband did to me was wrong. Every facet of society makes a girl or woman who has been violated feel as if they somehow had a hand in it. If a girl is raped by her father, amidst the uncomfortable silences and the questionable stares, someone is bound to ask, well, why didn't she run away? If a woman is walking down a dark street and is raped and killed by a stranger, I'm sure somebody somewhere will ask, well, why was she out so late? My stepfather raped and molested me for 2 years, but because he didn't say, I'll kill you if you tell, and because my mother testified that I enjoyed it, that he was only convicted of statutory rape. But no one asked me about the bruises that covered my little sister's body, or the fact that she may not have eaten for 2 days, because the last time he came into my room, I said no. No one ever asked me if I thought that letting men have their way with me was my lot in life. They didn't know that when I was 5, the 18-year-old man down the street would be in the presence of other children, rub his penis against my behind, hug me, and say, this is my girlfriend. They didn't know that the man who picked me up from elementary school to protect me from strangers would make a quick detour to his house so he could get naked and rub his penis between my thighs. Neither did they know that the uncle who always made sure he came to visit me when he was in town also made sure to make an extra visit at night to ram his fingers inside of me when no one else was around. They didn't know that by 10, I was already convinced that this was what I was made for, and so had just resolved to lay down and take it. But my dad, without even discussing what happened, made me feel loved and unashamed, as if I had a chance at being socially acceptable, as if I had a chance at being virtuous despite what I learned in church. My father built up a standard in me. His love and acceptance filled me so that sometimes I forgot that I was a statistic. Sometimes I forgot that I wasn't supposed to be so confident, so assertive. Most times, when someone hears about my past, they marvel at how I don't seem to fit the profile of a sexual abuse victim. I think there were many factors and conscious choices that steered me away from that fate. However, a good deal of my wholeness can be attributed to the fact that when I was with my father, I got a break from all of that. He didn't look at me with pity in his eyes. We didn't share any awkward moments. I was 25 years old, still sitting on his lap, still walking down the road holding his hand. Periodically, he would perform spot checks. If we discussed sex or one of my sexual encounters, he would ask if I ever had a problem, if my past ever affected it. After I told him no, he would ask, "Are you sure?" in an effort to reassure me that he was willing to talk. It never came up, but I knew that if it did, he would help me to work it out. Ironically, though, it came up later, but he wasn't here to get me through it. By the day of my father's funeral, my patience with the trivialities of life and the ridiculous process of planning a funeral had worn thin. I put on a good, calm face, but I actually wanted to scream and wail like a baby for it all to be over. I rode in the front seat with the funeral director who drove the limo. He was a classmate of my father's. My Uncle Gerald and his wife Pauline sat behind me. I think that maybe it was around this time that I started feeling the separating of my soul. My mind was totally blank, and yet I was managing to engage in conversation, make suggestions, and just otherwise go through with this life. But inside, I could feel that I was already disengaging. I was on borrowed time. I was preparing or was well on my way to checking out of my mind. What was left for me to do? We had bought the suit, the casket, printed the obituaries. The only thing left was for me to get out of that limo, walk into that church, sit on the front pew 7 feet away from a very expensive casket that held the body of my beloved father, and admit to myself that this was not a dream, but the other side of the door that I had been so afraid to approach. When I was between the years of 5 and 7, I had a very disturbing dream. The scenery and the people all resembled an art project that we used to make in grade school. On white cardstock, we'd either randomly or systematically color the card, then color over it in black crayon. We then carved through the black with a thin utensil, making what outlines of objects that we liked. I don't know what our teacher called this, but I loved it and only mention it now because my dream looked like one of my art projects. In this dream, my father had come back from a fishing trip and presented me with a rather normal sized fish. He sat for only a moment, kneeling in front of me, holding this fish. When he stood, he announced that he was leaving. If I remember correctly, I asked him to stay a while longer, but he refused, insisting that it was time for him to go. I cried so hard that I woke myself. Now I wonder if I had known all along that my dad would leave me soon. When I was 7, Smokey Robinson released an album on which there was a song entitled "I've Kissed Your Lips 1,000 Times." I was so excited when my mom brought it home. I called over Carla, my 5-year-old comrade. We put on the album, laid down on my mom's black velvet ottoman, and cried. When my family inquired about this strange behavior, I replied that the song made me think about my father and made me miss him. A month after his death, I went for a pedicure. My attendant told me that in her culture, my protruding second toe which is much longer than my big toe, meant that my father would die before my mother. Despite my warning signs, I never expected to see my father, so young, laying in a casket 7 feet away from me. When my great grandfather passed, my father was impressed with how eloquently I spoke at the funeral. Even though I felt as if I was coming apart, I wanted to make my father proud. I went to the podium and read the insert I had written for his obituary. Brothers, we do not want you to be ignorant about those who fall asleep or to grieve like the rest of men who have no hope. 1 Thessalonians 4:13. This is my hope. I hope that right now my father's newborn body is wrapped in soft white linens. I hope that Grandma, Uncle Charles, Uncle Ozzie, his grandmother, and all of the ancestors are taking turns passing him around like a new babe, stroking his hair and kissing his cheeks. I hope they feed him milk and honey until he starts to grow stronger. Although he may cry out in fear, I hope the many-breasted one will pull him close into the peace of the Most High until his fears dissipate. I hope that when he opens his eyes for the first time, the first face that he'll see is Grandma's, so he'll know immediately that his labor was not in vain. I hope that the ancient mothers will massage oil into his arms and legs to awaken his muscles. I hope then the ancient fathers will come and stand him up, giving him time, not rushing, but still making him ready for the new journey before him. And then, after he has gained strength and has acquainted himself with his new surroundings, I hope that he'll get to read from the book of truth. And when the fullness of God is revealed, I hope that he won't be too surprised, but he'll smile knowingly on some of the parts. And when he is ready for strong meat and able to walk independently and his eyes have adjusted to the light, I hope he will anoint his head and feet with sweet smelling oils, and he'll dress himself in white linen, slip on a pair of sandals, and as he's leaving out to attend the great coming home feast, I hope he'll stop for just 5 seconds and think of me. And in that short time, I hope there are no regrets. I hope that he knows he was the best. I hope he knows that I'm happy to be called his. I hope he knows because of his love and teachings that I believe I can do anything except fall for anything. Within that 5 seconds, I hope he smiles real big because I made him proud. And then, after that time is up, I hope he'll turn and walk confidently to the feast, sit down with the ancestors and the Most High, and rejoice. Before I left Milwaukee, I made sure to pack an article that Venus had provided the Women of Rights with during our autumn leave session. The author suggested that we should learn from the leaves. When leaves turn colors and fall from the trees, their deaths make room for new life. As humans, we must accept that dying is a part of the life process. Embrace it. When our loved ones are ready to transition to the other side, we shouldn't hold on to them, but encourage them on into newer travels. We should shout, Bon voyage, or see you soon, as their souls take flight in the wind. Those words gave me great comfort and peace. When I went out to the limo for the procession to the graveyard, there was a beautiful fallen leaf on my seat. Journal entry, November 24th, 2003. November 22nd, I buried my dad. That night, I felt like his casket had been lifted off my chest. But today, I drove past the cemetery and started to cry. I'm trying to decide what to do with my father's books. He has so many of them. Unfortunately, as much as he loved books and knowledge, he had them piled up with garbage and roaches were laying eggs and crawling all over them. I can't help but think that the same thing was going on in my dad's mind. I feel like a detective trying to piece everything together, but I know that everything I need is in that house. We just have to sort through everything to find it. Yet, what is it? What is it? The truth, the lies, the reason he died, why he gave up, why he didn't want to live, why? I really don't know what I'm looking for. Journal entry, November 28th, 2003, midnight. I'm on my way back to Milwaukee. Leaving Arkansas feels like I'm leaving home. I'm eating Swedish fish when I know I shouldn't, too many carbs. I had a dream last night about performing burdens. I told James and Michelle that I feel like I've been split in two. One half of me is in the grave with my dad. The other half is trying to decide whether to live or die. I'm trying to make plans for the near future. I know without them, I'll just lay in bed listening to Donny Hathaway's greatest hits CD number 1 and number 8 and crying because I'm half dead. How do you live when you are ready to die? Journal entry, November 29th, 2003. I'm almost to Chicago. Calandra said it's cold. I think I have on enough stuff. I had quite a few different dreams last night. One was I had returned to work and we were giving the kids a dance. When the music started playing, they all just stayed in their seats. Some even laid their heads down and went to sleep. I thought about how at the last dance they were all over the place. I wondered if their being lethargic had anything to do with my being gone. In another dream, some of the women from work, Nunciata, Mrs. Dorsey, Sherry, and a few others were in this huge room, and they were all spaced out and dressed all in black. I walked to each of them, and they hugged me, said some words of condolence or encouragement, and said they were glad I was back, I think. Then Mrs. Dorsey offered for me to go on a trip with her to California for 2 days. I think I'm going to make an appointment with Dr. Reish about my chest and breathing. I suppose I need to keep a close check on my heart since complications apparently run in the family. I don't know how I feel about going back to Milwaukee. To be honest, I don't know how I feel about anything right now. Maybe staying away from Milwaukee is only prolonging the inevitable, which is the continuation of my life. All I know is my father is dead, and that was never a part of my life's equation. I don't doubt God, but I know that the Most High is omniscient, for I know that the Most High is omniscient. I think that right now I've lost touch with the God in me, which has made me ignorant of my next step. Journal entry, November 30th, 2003. Today, a different battle. My life seems like someone is trying to pave my soul. Got my highs mixed in with my lows, don't know which way to go, left, right, up, down, live, die, to be or not to be is the question. What's my place here? No longer guessing because I don't care, because my eyes can't see the forest for the trees, can't see the ground for the leaves, can't believe that my father is gone. Feel like I'm split in half, straight down the middle, got a new riddle. How do you live when you're ready to die? How can you laugh when you can't stop crying? My daddy kept me balanced, told me the truth, but he lied when he said he was all right. Wanted to call him today like I did every Sunday night, but now my life is silent because my phone don't ring. My heart can't sing because it's buried 6 feet under. My daddy has always had my heart. When he left, he took it with him. All right, we have come to the end of that section entitled Death. I want to invite you now, if you too are on a grief journey, um, to consider the following prompts for writing and or reflection. Seeing death in any form can call us to face questions we would rather avoid. They are the ultimate questions of life. Who am I? Who have I become? Who do I want to be? For your reflection, your prompt is, how has your loss made you reflect on who you are today? What questions about life, love, or purpose have come to the surface since their passing? Thank you again for sharing this space with me. And next chapter is called Reluctant Resurrection. Peace.